Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. Today, a shootout between two 41-ish millimeter stainless steel full bracelet automatic chronometer chronographs. It's Tudor Black Bay Chrono Pink versus Omega Speedmaster 57 versus starts now. All right, fascinating watches we've got right here, and one could even argue that they may not be a perfect comparison, because if I had a Breitling Premier chronograph, I could literally compare the Tudor to a watch with the exact same movement. Well, we're going to get to that in a moment. Let's just talk about these two and why I chose the first generation Speedmaster 57. That is because the second generation is a manual wind watch, and I see too many differences and distinctions between a manual wind and an automatic. This, especially given the number of automatic 57s already on the market, feels like a better comparison. So let's start with the Tudor Chrono Pink, because this is a watch that was heavily publicized in 2024 when it came out. Should be fresh in everyone's memory. 41 millimeters in stainless steel. It's based on the Black Bay Chronograph platform, which uses an MT5813 based on the Breitling B01. I say based on because there are some distinctions. We'll wind this watch back up. It's 41 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel and 14.5 millimeters thick, 49.9 from lug tip to lug tip. You can see it features pivoted end links and a 22 millimeter spacing in between the lugs on a Jubilee style 5-link bracelet. Of course, Tudor is Rolex's little brother, and so we do have some carryover in terms of design, and so that resemblance within the family is no coincidence. When it's on my wrist, it wears nicely, though you can feel that this is a big watch. Some of the elements may be heritage derived, but it feels like a modern watch in terms of size, solidity, and weight. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see the pivoted end link of this bracelet helps to mitigate any issues, and I really appreciate that. The watch is also a little bit thinner than the Omega, and we'll see that to good effect in just a moment. So let's talk about what you're actually getting when you buy this watch. First, it was a 2024 model, and if you want to buy a 2025 Tudor Black Bay Chrono standard price for something that's a Panda, inverse Panda, blue dial, on the Jubilee style bracelet, it's going to be $6,350 in 2025. Pre-owned, these go for about $11,000 to $12,000. So we're talking real money here. In terms of its advantages, well, it's got a couple of them. The first is that this is clearly the style leader. Even if it weren't for the hugely charismatic and very exclusive pink dial, I would feel that overall this just has more going for it. Screw downs on modern chronographs are largely unnecessary to achieve high degrees of water resistance, but they look really, really cool. The aluminum bezel insert is both vintage correct and looks the business, so it's got that right sort of metallic sheen to it. I feel like these gentle lug bevels are more elegant than the more brutal fashion you'll see on the Omega. Both of these watches are vintage inflected and in different ways, and we'll go over that. The bracelet, a 5-link here, just seems more graceful and definitely feels a bit more supple with better heat venting and moisture venting on the wrist. That's an advantage for me. I think that the use of Submariner snowflake style dial features, like you might have found on a Tudor Submariner of the 1968 to mid-70s generation, that looks really nice here, as does the chaptering outboard for reading the seconds, minutes, and chrono seconds fractions. We've got a sort of pink panda aesthetic here. We've got a pink primary dial, and then we've got these black sub-registers. One distinction to note here is that this is a true twin register chronograph versus the Omega, which is a triple register. And actually, they're both fascinating in that neither one of them uses a conventional 30-minute chronograph register. This one has a 45-minute register. This one has a 60-minute, so a little bit unusual in that regard. It's 200 meters versus 100 meters for the Omega. So moving from sort of its style leadership, let's talk about more concrete advantages. With the screw downs, this is a Black Bay after all, 200 meter water resistance to 100 with a push down crown on the Omega. In terms of exclusivity, I recall last year, even large Tudor dealers were getting 2 to 3 of these, so there's just not a lot of these out in the world, whereas Omega has made many of these from 2013 forward. I would also argue the loom on the Tudor is better, and I can demonstrate that concretely here, where initially it might seem like they're very close, but particularly with the narrow and relatively weak luminescent strips on the Omega, it fades quite quickly, whereas the Tudor remains quite bright. And while I do give the Omega points for its luminescent chrono minute and hour hands, I can't say that they're really any easier to read in the dark without reference points. So in terms of brightness and luminescent endurance as minutes roll by, it's going to be in favor of the Tudor. Again, with only 2 to 3 distributed at large dealers per year, this is going to be a much, much more exclusive watch. It is also thinner. It fits better. 14.5 millimeters does not seem like a lot until we get into tri-level Omega coaxial chronograph territory, where this is 16.5, and even that is not as thick as these Omega tri-level coax chronographs get. In terms of lug-to-lug, because of the pivoted end links, this is 49.9. This watch right here is going to be 54 millimeters from end link to end link, so it's much larger across the wrist and much thicker on the wrist. Also important to note is that we've got a clasp here that uses the Tudor T-Fit system, which is sort of like a baby version of Rolex Glide Lock, and you've got a lot of incremental adjustability here, about 8 millimeters of total adjustable range, and this can be used for fine-tuning the fit. And it's easy to use, very user-friendly, absolutely no tools required. Taking a look at the bracelet, you can see this is going to be a draw between them. We have removable links fixed by screws, so no advantage there. But in terms of the adjustability within the clasp, advantage. Also, 70-hour power reserve versus 60-hour power reserve. 70 is pretty much the industry standard now, whereas 60 might have seemed like a lot when the basic 8500 series that underpins this came out in 2007, but the industry has moved on beyond that. Okay, also let's talk about the competitor. I want to qualify that this silver rose accented dial is not necessarily going to be the most compelling, and it's a little bit unfair to compare this silver dial to the single most charismatic version of the Tudors. Just keep in mind there are other dial colors, some of which are a bit more vibrant. This is fairly conservative. Just keep in mind with this model you have options. The Speedmaster 57 is modeled after, in some respects, the CK2915, which was the first Speedmaster back in 1957. So whereas we have some vintage lug bevels, screw-down crowns, aluminum anodized bezel inserts, snowflake-style dial here, what we've got here is a lot of direct reference to one specific Speedmaster, which is the 1957 model, whereas Tudor's cues are distributed from the 50s to the 70s. This is reminiscent of one particular watch, which is why we have these squared off lug ends. We don't have lyre style lugs. We don't have any crown guard profiles here. And then on the dial, we've got these broad arrow style accents like the hour hand of the Chrono subregister, alpha style hands for other indications, the twin register layout, and then a metal tachymetric scale with a crystal that is a sapphire, but it's domed and cambered like a vintage plexi. The watch features a very robust clasp, and I don't want to in any way disparage it because the T-Fit system obviously doesn't have any equivalent here. If you want to make intermediate sizing adjustments, you're going to use these intermediate size links that we have built into the bracelet. Throwing it on the wrist, it's a larger piece. It feels larger. It looks larger. There's no hiding the size, particularly the thickness and the end link to end link distance across the wrist. So again, my wrist 16 centimeters in circumference. I think I could wear this, but a smaller wrist cannot, whereas a smaller wrist than mine absolutely can wear the Tudor Black Bay Chrono. Advantages here include a couple of things that the Tudor doesn't offer out of the gate, and an obvious one is that we've got a display case back, so if you want to see your movement game on. Also, we have a feature that's going to be very practical for travelers where you can change your time zone while everything from the chronograph to the other indications of the dial, like the running seconds and the minutes, are not affected. And you can see I'm able to jump the date forward and backwards. That's a nice feature to have. I still have the hacking seconds function. What I don't have is a conventional quick set. Exotic escapement, the tri-level coaxial, which you can sort of see on its own little bridge below the balance bridge. Tri-level coaxial was invented by George Daniels of Britain in 1974, and from 1999 to the present, Omega has been working it into its lineups and perfecting it. It is a tangential friction escapement that does away with the sliding friction of the Swiss lever, thereby improving things like chronometry and reducing maintenance needs. It is a twin barrel movement, so while it doesn't have an enormous power reserve. It does have a very flat and consistent torque peak that's consistent from almost fully wound to almost fully discharged in a way the Breitling movement in the Tudor is not. The column wheel here is visible underneath a partially skeletonized bridge. Now it is a little bit of a hybridization of a cam and a column wheel, but you can see in its continuous rotation, it is functionally like a column wheel. And I'm also going to opine one more advantage of the Tudor. I know I'm cutting into the Omega's screen time here, but the Tudor has a much better column wheel feel because this is a true column wheel. This is also a vertical clutch. Both of them are, so they have seamless engagement with no jump or stagger to the seconds hand. And if you just want to leave them both running, there will be no additional wear and tear. Vertical clutches don't have that problem if they are run continuously. So besides the exotic escapement, it's a little bit of a feather in the cap of Omega that it has this exclusive caliber that's not used in other Swatch Group brands and is more or less sourced in-house from Swatch Group resources. That matters because Tudor uses the Breitling B01. It makes some changes to the B01, and those changes include swapping out a 30-minute register for a 45-minute register, replacing Breitling's metal hairspring with Tudor's silicon anti-magnetic one, and also, of course, one of the changes that you'll find here with this watch is that you flat out cannot see the movement, whereas Breitling gives you the ability to see it. It might be a little bit too obvious if you were to allow people to see how similar this looks to the movement in the back of a Premier or a Chronomat. Another advantage here, though, compared to the standard Breitling, is that we do get a free-sprung regulator, which is not something Breitling offers. So between the unusual minute counter, the free-sprung balance, and the silicone hairspring, Tudor does make some worthwhile changes. There's also some decorative elements. Well, the architecture is very familiar. If you were to open this up, it would, for example, have a Tudor-owned rotor. Jumping back to the advantages that the Omega has, it's going to be a little bit more shock resistant because the movement is thicker, it is a little bit more robust. It's got a full balance bridge and a free sprung balance. So the Tudor has a free sprung balance, but this has a full balance bridge anchored on both sides, not a balance cock anchored on only one side like the Tudor. So potentially a more durable movement. Also, a 3-register dial. Now, if you were to stop everything, reset, it might look like this is a twin register dial, but you can see these superimposed chronograph minute and hour hands here. So you've got 2 registers on one dial and a nice balanced twin register design. I would also say far less money. That's important to note because pre-owned these are about $6,000 to $7,000, whereas pre-owned we've already explained that this is well into the 5-figure range at $11,000 to $12,000. And I'm not going to get too hung up on the fact that this is a silver dial and this is the sexiest, most colorful dial Tudor offers on this model. Let's say they were both silver dial, which you can get here with a Panda style. Which one would I choose? To be perfectly honest, on ergonomics alone, I choose the Tudor. The thinner case, the shorter distance across the wrist, that means a lot to me. The extra water resistance is nice, but I don't need it. 100 is enough here. The beefy screw downs may not be necessary, but they look the business. The extra lume is important to me as a person who often looks at his watch in the dark as I come into the home at night after nightfall. That's always handy to have. Or if I'm looking at the time as I shoot videos in the dark with only a small light source, this is very useful. I'll also mention that the extra 10 hours of power reserve is handy, and the T-Fit system in the clasp is deeply appealing to me. Add exclusivity that's almost up there with something like a Rolex Daytona, and the Tudor for me has a lot more going for it. I just appreciate it more aesthetically and technically, and the lack of a manufacturer caliber or an exclusive caliber does not bother me. So guys, let me know, which of these two would you choose? We might do a second round, maybe an ace match between this and a full bracelet Breitling Premier chronograph, which at face value has the same movement. So let me know in the description comments below. What do you think? Which one of these would you pick? I would pay the premium for the Tudor, but if price is an object, or you're an Omega fan, or you want a display case back, your decision may be different. Let me know. Time out.